Battle of Mosul, the untold story of the deadliest urban battle since WWII. Ask yourself, why did a group of radicals once dismissed as just another militia manage to seize one of Iraq's largest cities in a matter of days? What made Mosul the epicenter of the most brutal urban battle since World War II? And how did a ragtag flotilla of 90 boats try and fail to ferry ISIS fighters across the Tigris under a hailstorm of bullets? This isn't just a war story. It's a tale of betrayal, resilience, and the high-stakes chess match between modern armies and medieval madness. From the rise of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to the fall of the Great Mosque of al-Nuri, this is the story of how a city was lost, reclaimed, and forever changed. So buckle up. Because what you're about to witness is not just history, it's a cinematic descent into the heart of darkness and the heroic climb back out. Once upon a time in the land of Mesopotamia, Iraq was licking its wounds from the American-led invasion of 2003. The regime of Saddam Hussein had been toppled, but what followed was less freedom and democracy and more sectarian chaos and insurgent bingo. The U.S. had no clear post-war roadmap, and the Iraqi government, led by Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, seemed more interested in consolidating power than healing divisions. The Sunni minority, once dominant under Saddam, found itself marginalized. De-Baathification policies stripped thousands of jobs, and the disbanding of the Iraqi army left a vacuum that would soon be filled by something far darker than unemployment. Radicalism. Fast forward to 2011. The Arab Spring was sweeping across the region like a political tornado. In Syria, Bashar al-Assad responded to protests with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, plunging the country into a brutal civil war. The chaos spilled across borders, and Iraq, already fragile, became a playground for extremist ideologies. Enter ISIS, formerly known as al-Qaeda, in Iraq. These guys weren't just your average radicals, they were the Apple Store of terrorism. Sleek branding, viral videos, and a terrifyingly efficient business model of conquest and cruelty. On June 4, 2014, ISIS launched its Balawi Vengeance campaign, named after their slain commander Abu Abdulrahman al-Balawi. Within 6 days, they captured Mosul, a city of nearly 2 million people, with a force of just 1,500 fighters. How? Because the Iraqi army, supposedly 60,000 strong, was riddled with ghost soldiers, fake names on payrolls, and real cowardice. Many troops fled, some without firing a shot. ISIS took everything: the airport, the banks, the prisons, and even the government buildings. It was like watching a hostile corporate takeover, except with more crucifixions and fewer spreadsheets. With Mosul under their control, ISIS's leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi strutted into the Great Mosque of al-Nuri like a villain revealing his master plan. Clad in black robes and a preacher's tone, he declared the birth of a new caliphate. Cue the global panic. ISIS spread like wildfire across Iraq and Syria, leaving behind a trail of terror, destruction, and medieval brutality. Public executions, slavery, and the systematic destruction of cultural heritage became their calling cards. Mosul's population plummeted from 2.5 million to 1.5 million as people fled or were killed. But the world wasn't going to let this horror show run forever. By 2016, the Iraqi government, Kurdish Peshmerga, Shia militias, and a US-led coalition decided it was time to cancel ISIS's subscription to reality. The Battle of Mosul was launched on October 16, 2016. It was the largest military operation in Iraq since the 2003 invasion. Over 100,000 troops faced off against roughly 10,000 ISIS fighters. Coalition airstrikes softened the city's defenses, and leaflets rained from the sky urging Mosul's residents to rise up. ISIS responded with tunnels, IEDs, and suicide bombers. They turned Mosul into a fortress of despair, even setting fire to the al-Mashraq sulfur plant, causing toxic fumes and mass hospitalizations. Enter the Golden Division, elite Iraqi special forces with more grit than a sandstorm. They stormed Bartella, eliminated 200 ISIS fighters, and pushed toward Mosul's heart. By October 24th, 800 ISIS fighters were dead, and 78 villages had been liberated. But ISIS wasn't done. They forced civilians to act as human shields, executed those who refused, and dug in for a last stand. The Iraqi government, wary of sectarian tensions, ordered Shia militias to stay outside the city proper, leaving the Iraqi army to finish the job. Now pause for a sec. Step into the extraordinary. Subscribe to Eccentric Digital Pixel. Welcome to the wild frontier of creativity, where pixels pulse with imagination and every frame tells a story you've never seen before. At Eccentric Digital Pixel, we don't follow trends. We bend reality. From surreal digital art to mind-blowing visual experiments, this is your backstage pass to the future of expression. Why hit subscribe? Get exclusive access to jaw-dropping digital creations? Be the first to witness new drops by turning on notifications? Dive into a world of eccentric brilliance that inspires, challenges, and captivates. Join a community of visionaries who crave the unconventional. Don't just scroll. Experience the pixel revolution. Smash that subscribe button and ring the bell to never miss a masterpiece. Because normal is boring, and you were born to see the world differently. As the sun rose over Mosul on November 1st, it wasn't birdsong that greeted the city. It was the thunderous roar of coalition artillery, tank fire, and machine guns. The eastern district of Karama became the canvas for this explosive symphony. ISIS fighters, ever resourceful in their medieval madness, lit tires on fire to create thick black smoke, hoping to blind coalition forces. It was a bit like trying to stop a hurricane with a hand fan. But the coalition wasn't buying it. Iraqi special forces stormed Gogjali, Mosul's easternmost suburb, and by the next day, resistance in the area had been reduced to a few stubborn pockets. Supply lines from Mosul to Raqqa were severed, cutting off ISIS's lifeline like a surgeon with a scalpel. Just as things were heating up, Mother Nature decided to throw a tantrum. Poor weather stalled the assault, and heavy resistance forced Iraqi troops to temporarily withdraw from Karama. But the offensive was still ahead of schedule. On November 3rd, the Iraqi Army's 9th Armored Division rolled into Al-Intisar like a steel juggernaut, and by November 4th, 6 more districts had been liberated. Meanwhile, on the southern front, Iraqi forces recaptured Hammam al-Alil, inching within 4 kilometers of Mosul International Airport. The noose around ISIS was tightening. Despite these victories, coalition commanders weren't popping champagne just yet. They knew that urban warfare is a slow, brutal grind. Protecting civilians and infrastructure was a top priority, which meant every step forward had to be measured, cautious, and painfully slow. The goal wasn't just to win, it was to win without turning Mosul into a graveyard. On November 7th, Kurdish forces, backed by coalition airstrikes, launched a renewed 3-pronged offensive to liberate the encircled town of Bashika. Most of the town was retaken that day, though a stubborn band of 100 to 200 ISIS fighters clung to the ruins like cockroaches in a bunker, resisting until the end of the month. Meanwhile, the Golden Division and the 9th Division began clearing liberated neighborhoods and screening fleeing civilians for hidden ISIS members. By the end of November, coalition forces had secured 19 neighborhoods, roughly 30% of eastern Mosul. To isolate ISIS fighters in eastern Mosul from their comrades across the Tigris River, coalition warplanes began targeting the city's 5 bridges. 4 were destroyed in precision strikes, and on December 6th, the final strategic bridge, known as the Old Bridge, was assaulted. ISIS counterattacked near al-Salam, and while they failed to halt the advance, they did manage a bitter victory at al-Salam Hospital, destroying or disabling 20 Iraqi vehicles. With a quarter of the city liberated, the coalition paused on December 21st for an operational refit. Vehicles were repaired, ammunition resupplied, and troops regrouped for the next phase. On December 27th, the Old Bridge was bombed, effectively severing East Mosul from West Mosul. 2 days later, the second phase of the operation began. The goal: seize the remaining ISIS-controlled districts in eastern Mosul. Clashes erupted on the southeastern and northern fronts. Progress slowed as troops struggled to distinguish civilians from combatants. Civilian casualties began to rise, a grim reminder of the human cost of liberation. On January 6th, Iraqi troops crossed the Al-Kawthar River and stormed the al-Butana district. 2 days later, ISIS launched a desperate counterattack against advancing Iraqi forces near Suqar and Baladiyat. But their forces were decimated under heavy resistance and relentless air support. As January turned to February 2017, elements of Iraq's 9th Division and federal police lunged toward the Sumer and Domes districts. Their boots hit the eastern bank of the Tigris River, marking the first time coalition forces had reached this symbolic divide. ISIS defenses were crumbling like stale bread under artillery fire. The battle for eastern Mosul was drawing to a close, but the real monster still lurked across the water. Western Mosul, the Caliphate's historical cradle, was next. And everyone knew it would be a nightmare wrapped in a minefield. With their eastern stronghold collapsing, surviving ISIS fighters made a frantic dash across the Tigris. Under a hailstorm of bullets and drone strikes, they launched a flotilla of 90 boats and 3 barges. It was less naval maneuver and more death wish. Most were sunk mid-river, their passengers swallowed by the current or shredded by gunfire. Refitted and rearmed, coalition forces launched the final phase of Operation We Are Coming Nineveh. Iraqi and Kurdish troops, backed by air support and on-ground advisors, surged into western Mosul. The first major prize, Mosul International Airport, seized on February 24th after fierce fighting. ISIS responded with a chemical mortar attack in eastern Mosul, injuring 12. Bad weather slowed the advance, but by March 7th, Iraqi forces had captured the Nineveh Governorate Complex, Mosul Museum, a central bank branch, and ISIS's main judicial court. 60% of western Mosul was now under coalition control. On March 12th, the U.S. envoy announced that Iraqi troops had cut all roads into western Mosul. The city was surrounded. With major landmarks falling, the battle moved into the Old City, a dense maze of alleyways and ancient stone, perfect for ambushes and horror. The fighting became a bitter, claustrophobic slog. Civilians were buried under rubble. Air support was grounded by weather. ISIS fired mustard gas rockets at Iraqi units, accompanied by American and Australian advisors, injuring 25. By May 16, coalition forces controlled 90% of western Mosul. But the final 10% was a death trap. Every house, every street, every shadow concealed suicide bombers or booby traps. ISIS began using women as suicide bombers, hiding among fleeing civilians. Dozens of innocents died in the chaos. On June 18th, Iraqi forces launched their final assault on the Old City. ISIS still held tens of thousands of civilians as human shields. Then on June 21st, a thunderous explosion echoed through Mosul. The Great Mosque of al-Nuri, where al-Baghdadi had declared the Caliphate in 2014, was obliterated. ISIS claimed a U.S. airstrike, but the evidence pointed to deliberate demolition from within. It was a symbolic suicide, the Caliphate's birthplace reduced to dust. On July 10th, Iraqi officials proclaimed victory. But the guns didn't fall silent until 2 weeks later, when the last pockets of resistance were crushed. The Battle of Mosul entered the history books as the deadliest and most destructive urban battle since World War II. Casualties: around 6,000 Iraqi and Kurdish soldiers, 10,000 ISIS fighters, and over 12,000 civilians perished. Destruction: entire neighborhoods were flattened. Infrastructure was annihilated. Cultural heritage was lost. Displacement: over 900,000 civilians were displaced. Families scattered. Trauma etched into generations. ISIS's fate: the Caliphate was shattered. Al-Baghdadi died in a U.S. Special Forces raid 2 years later. Mosul was liberated in July 2017, but the victory came at a steep price. Over 10,000 civilians were killed, and much of the city was reduced to rubble. The UN and international partners launched massive reconstruction efforts, including rebuilding the iconic al-Nuri Mosque and clearing millions of tons of debris. The battle was over, but the scars remained: physical, emotional, and political. Mosul's story is one of tragedy, resilience, and the high cost of letting extremism fester. Before we dive headfirst into the chaos of Mosul's streets and the unraveling of a caliphate, here's your mission, should you choose to accept it. If you love gripping true stories, military drama, and historical deep dives that feel like cinematic thrillers, then don't just watch, join the movement. Hit that subscribe button, follow us, and click the notification bell so you never miss a moment when we drop another tale that'll leave you speechless, stunned, and smarter than your history teacher. Because trust me, this isn't the last time we'll be dragging history out of the shadows and into the spotlight.